All right, looks like we have about 1 more minute before we get started. Jordan, I like your smile.
I am just quivering with excitement.
Yes, and I see that all over your face. All right, thank you for joining us with our ELAR content specific cadre part of the day for our for our new cadre members. We're excited about having you on board. We know that our previous cadre members, they were able to get off the line earlier. So we thank you for staying with us. We know that this is summertime and you could give your time to other things that are going on in your life, but thank you for being here. I placed in the chat just the agenda of what we're going to discuss this afternoon. We are not going to hold you until 4 o'clock. As soon as we complete the agenda items, you will be free to enjoy the rest of this marvelous Monday. So as you see, introductions. We'll introduce ourselves, and I would like everybody to take a moment to introduce yourselves because you will be working collaboratively with others. Then we'll have just a small piece around 21, 22, roles and responsibilities of a cadre members. We're not going to give you any information. We're just going to talk through some of the roles and responsibilities, knowing that we will give you a document in August when we meet face to face. We are going to have a presentation on copyright, and with Chris Drury, who will be leading that presentation, followed by a presentation on our style guide. Danielle shared some pieces of that style guide in our curriculum and instruction handbook, but Jordan is going to go into more depth around the style guide in those pieces. So Jordan is excited about sharing that information with you. And then we will end with any questions that you will have. So I do have a question before we get started. Would you all like to, and that question is, would you like to stop after our copyright presentation for lunch and come back at 1 o'clock? Or would you like to move forward throughout our agenda items and leave at about 2 o'clock or 1:30? So if you're for stopping at lunch at, what time is lunch? I believe it's at 11:30 or 12 o'clock and coming back at 1, if you'll give me a thumbs up. If you would like to move through the agenda and complete this day early, give me a thumbs up. All right, here we're going to go through the agenda and then you'll be free to enjoy the rest of your Monday. So let's go ahead and get started with introductions. I am Andrea Hicks. I am the English Language Arts Coordinator. Again, welcome. Great to have you all. And we'll start with the specialists. And then I'll call on others depending on where you are in my little boxes on the screen. So let's start with specialists in alpha order, as we should be accustomed to doing that. So specialists, if you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chris Drury. I am ELAR specialist that works with secondary primarily, mostly grades sophomore and English 3.
Hi, I am Jennifer Gerard, another secondary ELAR specialist. I mainly work with English 1 and 12.
I'm Jordan Ferguson, a secondary specialist. I work with grades 6, 7, and 8.
Sandra?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sandra Redding. I'm an elementary specialist, and I work mainly with third grade and kindergarten.
And I'm Taisha Hill, elementary specialist, and I work with 5th grade and 1st grade.
And I think Sandra was waiting because Nikki is not with us today, but Nikki always comes before Sandra. So she
I was going by last names.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not specify. Don't we usually go by first names? I did not specify. Nikki Walls works with elementary, and so she's not with us at this moment. So just know she is another elementary specialist. So Jennifer Barlow, you just tell us who you are, what campus.
I am Jennifer Barlow, and I am 3rd grade ELAR at Short Elementary.
Thank you. Nice to have you. Alexi.
Hi, I'm Alexi Dillathader. I will be serving my 2nd year as the English 1 level lead at Bowie High School.
Great. Welcome. Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Smith. I teach 3rd grade ELAR at Atherton Elementary.
Seth.
Hi, I'm Seth Newton. I teach English 1 and debate at Martin High School.
All right, Janelle, and I hope I pronounced your first name correctly.
Hi, my name is Charnel Johnson, and I teach 5th grade ELAR at Larson Elementary.
Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Roper. I used to teach 3rd grade self-contained, but this year I'll be the student support interventionist.
Claudine.
Hello, I'm Claudine. I go by Tennille. I'm at Nichols Junior High, and I'm instructional coach.
Larissa.
I think Larissa is trying to get to the math meeting. Do you have the link to that, Andrea?
Oh, okay. Let me look and see. And Katie, if you can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Katie Letts. I'm 4th grade self-contained at Crow Leadership Academy.
Nice to meet all of you. Let me see if I can get. All right, Jennifer, if you want to just quickly share with our members that are here a couple of the roles and responsibilities for this year. And then when we get together in August, we'll go into more specific around elementary, secondary. But she's going to give you a high glance overview of some of those roles and responsibilities for the year.
If I can unmute, there we go. Is it okay if I go ahead and share screen for what they'll get later this in August?
Yes, I believe Jordan or Chris could give you that privilege.
I think it's going to have to be Chris.
You got it now, Jennifer.
Thanks. All right, so this is just basically the same exact information we just saw when looking at our style guide, where it's kind of the holistic look where you had the columns and the X's per grade level of what we work on in C&I. But I wanted to share this screen, and I'm not sure if it's sharing the right one. Do you guys see cadre information? Thank you. My other screen went blank, so I had no idea what just happened. But these are some of the deliverables, at least on the high school side. Elementary will have a couple of additional ones, but just again, we're looking at companion documents, our curriculum assessments and benchmarks, our end of year assessments, our resources are a big one for us, your presentations, and any other kind of responsibilities we may assign to you, just depending on what grade level you're working with. You'll have different things you're working on. We wanted to put a quick description in there that you can peruse now, but again, you're going to get a copy of this when we meet again in a couple of weeks. But I wanted you to really take a look at the time frame. Our two biggest things that are going to go on all year long are really the companion document and USAs and our curriculum resources. So just know that those are going to be things that you're constantly working on, and then kind of interspersed between there, you'll have our curriculum assessment edits and benchmark edits, as well as working on our presentations, which is another big one. We're going to ask that each one of you help us with at least 3 professional development opportunities this year. And again, that's going to look a little different in the elementary side as opposed to the high school side or secondary side. But we do want you to start thinking about that and the idea around presentations. The 3 of us, well, I'm sorry, the 6 of us and then 7 with our coordinator are all here to help you if you have any kind of questions or need support with the presentations. We do ask that one of those presentations are part of our boot camps that'll happen in the spring. And so you'll notice with presentations, we go from September to March, and after March, you're free because our boot camps will be done at that point. I think that's really all. Again, it was a high overview, as Ms. Hicks said, about what we're going to be asking for you this upcoming school year. And that's what I have.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. Larissa, I am still waiting on the email for the link. I did not have the actual link. I have the picture of the QR code, and it's not allowing me to place that in the chat. So if you'll just hold tight one moment, I'll have that link for you shortly. Any questions around roles and responsibilities? With that, I'll just say that you will receive information and you have time to create and revise any deliverables that the team gives you. So don't feel like you're going to have all of this work to do at one time. You will have time. You will know far in advance of what sessions we're going to ask you to either attend, help create, or facilitate. And so those are some things that when we meet face-to-face, what we normally do is have you to sign up for, give you session topics, and depending on your comfort level, you sign up for those sessions that you want to work collaboratively in the team with. And so just know that we are here to support as you build your leadership capacity. We'll be right there beside you, supporting you. And I wanted you all to introduce yourselves to each other because you will be working at some point with each other collaboratively. So with that being said, any questions around roles and responsibilities, anything that was covered earlier with Jared or anything that Jennifer just stated? Okay. Chris, take it away.
All right. Good morning. Y'all doing okay today? Good. All right. I'm going to throw more information at you. So this should be exciting, but I'm going to encourage you to stay loose, stay relaxed, and know that all of us specialists are here to help you and guide you along and help you deal with all this information. It's kind of like, I mean, you've experienced this before. You're like first year teaching, you showed up and it's like, hey, I went to district meetings and got all this stuff dumped on me. And then I showed up to campus meetings and got all this stuff dumped on me. And then it was like, oh, how do I sort through it? You're going to sort through it and it's going to be fine. And for a lot of you, this is a review of some things you probably know. So just wanted to let you know that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about copyright. And before I do, I want you to know I'm not a lawyer. If I was, I would be off making a lot more money than this and doing lawyer things. So I don't know all the laws of copyright. I've just got some overviews. Most of what I learned, I gleaned from reading and from talking to the specialist in the library department, Leslie Kano, who is even more well-versed in this than me. And in fact, I just straight up asked for her presentation and stole huge portions of it for this. But having done some work for a few years writing curriculum and moving through the extended, like, oh, we really have to think about copyright now that we're virtual, I have a couple of insights that I've added in specific to ELAR. So when we look at that, some things that you should probably know. Why is this important? If you haven't already figured it out, it's in our employee handbook, and Jared shared some of that today. It's in the board policy. I have here, you could be fired. I just want you to know that's not a threat. That's not like, those are things that could happen. Copyright infringement is a theft of another person's property, and it's also a crime. So we have to be careful of these things. So they're a real consequence. So one of the things that the board policy says, it uses fair use a lot. And as educators, we've heard a lot about, like, hey, fair use is kind of our catch-all. It helps us be able to use whatever we want. But the truth is that we can't just use whatever we want with fair use. So what does that mean? It allows for limited use of copyrighted material without having to seek permission from the copyright holder. Even I heard Leslie say one time, typically teachers will use this. They'll get an article that was relevant in the newspaper that morning. They'll bring it into the classroom. They'll look at it. They'll talk about it. They don't have time to go get permission from the newspaper people, but then they'll use that same article next year. And now it does not fall into fair use because they had time to go find permission and email people. And so that's one way that fair use has come up to be a problem in the past. So it allows for limited use of copyright. There's 4 factors that help us determine if it's fair use. The purpose and character of the use. So the fact that it's for nonprofit educational use covers a lot for us. But again, a lot of times we really need to get permission even after we know that we're using it for education and nonprofit. Is it factual or creative or published or not? So in ELA, we know that we need to have kids read nonfiction. They're going to have to read opinion pieces and persuasive pieces. They're going to need to read expository pieces. And so factual or creative is a huge, huge deal. And we'll talk some more about where this comes in later too, as we look at our particular curriculum documents and the products we produce and why the creative process kind of drives, like, we have to look at that. The amount in essence of the work used. So if we use just a paragraph from the Hunger Games, we're probably okay. But if we use the part of the Hunger Games, like we give away the ending right there in class, or we use several chapters of it, and we don't have permission to use that, that becomes pretty huge. Also, the effect on the market for the creator. And this gets an asterisk because we're in America where capitalism runs everything. And so if we're sharing something that they could make a profit off of, and this is where it comes back to the newspapers, if they make a profit off of it and we're sharing it, and they can't make that profit anymore, then it becomes a problem. So there are some myths that we have as educators. If it's on the internet, it's fair use. I think this past year has kind of stopped being a big myth. I think we've done a pretty good job of educating people that just because it's on the internet, it may not be fair use. If it's for education, it's fair use. We're finding that no, that's not necessarily true. And then the one that I think has gotten some school districts, even in Texas, I've heard stories about school districts that put things behind a login or password so that, hey, this is something that we've used as a district. It's a test prep material. We're going to put all the test prep PDFs on our website, but it's behind a login and a password so other people can't get to it. And we're not violating copyright. It turns out they got sued and they lost a lot of money because of it. So let's take a close look at what favors fair use. If it's going to be occasional and limited, so if you're putting it up for a day in your classroom, you're putting it up in Canvas or another, Seesaw. If you're putting it up in those for one day and it's limited to your class and it's going to be taken down after that day, a lot of times that will cover you. It's for classroom use only. It's for research and scholarship directly related to educational objective. Access is restricted to current students and for a short time. Again, that same thing. Proper citations so that they can go and find the entire work if they want to, small quantity of the work, and no effect on the potential market for the work. So if all of those things are in play, then we're doing pretty good. And we're not completely covered. We're not completely safe, but we're going to make a pretty good argument if somebody brings it up that this is fair use, particularly when it's classroom use only, research and scholarship, and when we're not using the whole work. Those are all big things that can come to it. So what opposes fair use? Well, we're not going to use it for commercial use. And we as curriculum writers are probably not going to put anything into the curriculum documents that says, hey, watch this Pixar movie for fun. That doesn't happen. But that's where classroom, you've heard stories of Disney coming after teachers who have a movie day in their classroom. If it's broad distribution or access, and this is where we come in, particularly as a curriculum department, if you put something up in Canvas, your students are going to see it. It can get leaked out to the bigger part of the web. But if we put it on our district website, there are people, I get asked for permissions to Google Docs from people all over the DFW Metroplex. I will open up and I'll get an email and it'll be like, so-and-so wants access to this document. And I'm like, who is that? That's not one of our teachers. And there are people that are sharing our materials out on the web and sharing it out. So it does happen. So if we put things up that we don't have copyright to, that is very broad distribution and access. If it's going to be repeated or ongoing, if I'm putting a document up that says, hey, use this resource, and that resource is copyrighted, it's going to be ongoing throughout that 6 weeks. Not related to an educational objective is not usually a problem for you. If we don't put the citation, that can become a problem. Unpublished work. This one only comes in if we decide that we're going to write something and use it, and then we decide later that we wanted the copyright to that and wanted to use that and sell it. So if I write a poem and put it on an assessment, and then I later decide I'm going to submit that poem for publication, I actually can't, because I wrote it for the district and the district owns the copyright to that now. But if you go out on the web and find somebody's unpublished work, some fan fiction or something, although in that case, usually that counts as publication on the web. But if a friend writes something and it says, hey, I have this great poem, and you put it on a test without asking them, they can sue us. Repeated long-term use is another one. Extensive excerpts or the entire work used, or it impairs potential market for the work and then made accessible on the internet. All of these things can get us in huge trouble. So how do I use text? We are the ELAR department. I have on multiple occasions said, hey, use this article from such and such newspaper. And then once we started really thinking about copyright, I had to rethink how I approached that. So how do I use those texts? Well, the first thing I could do if I want to use an article is I can contact the copyright holder and ask permission. And we've done that before. And we've been told no, and we've been told yes. And so whenever we're told yes, we save that permission. That usually comes in the form of an email or a document, and we save that and put that on file somewhere. If you don't hear back, so you email some blogger who put a blog up in 2009 for this really great article you want to use, and they don't ever email you back because they haven't checked their blog in 10 years, you can't use it. Even though they may have left it on the web, you cannot, and when I say you can't use it, you can't print it out and hand it out to your kids, make copies, anything other than link to their blog where they can go to their the students can go to their website and see it. On the website, it's important to check terms and conditions, and if permitted, link out to the text. So some texts, some websites might actually say things like, hey, you cannot embed our text inside something like Canvas. You need to link out to it, and you can find that in terms and conditions, and I'll show you what one of those looks like in just a minute. You can also restrict, you can just make it so that you're only going to use things that people have made available. So you can go into your Google searches and licenses and say, I only want things that are licensed for commercial reuse or can be redistributed or copyright free. I particularly like to use Creative Commons licensed properties. That's where that citation comes in really importantly, because almost all of the Creative Commons people are people who are trying to get noticed. And so they've created some artwork that you can use in presentations, or they've got an article that they are completely fine with you reading, but they want their credit in the link so that people can go out and see where their stuff is on the web. So again, citations are always important. You can always use works in the public domain. There's some workarounds with that. There's also some problems with that. And just to give you an idea, in general works published after 77 will not fall into the public domain until 70 years after the death of the author, or for corporate works, anonymous works, or works for hire, 95 years from the date of publication, or 120 years from the date of creation, whichever expires first. And the fun fact about this is that these terms change as soon as Mickey Mouse comes into public domain, because Disney goes and lobbies our lawmakers to change the law so that Mickey Mouse stays private, and then these years get extended. And I think they need to come up with another solution to that, because I mean, I think it's fair to say, hey, Mickey Mouse isn't always our copyright, and there are other instances of that. So online read alouds, this particularly pertains to elementary. So when we had the situation we were in, and I'm sure it'll continue because probably some people got noticed, some publishers are giving permissions for teachers and librarians conducting an online read aloud. Access this document, and there's a link to learn about best practices for reading books online. And if you guys have questions about that, I can drop that document in the link or into the chat later, or you can email me and I can give you that document. But that's another place we get in trouble, is we link to YouTube videos. I've had people, and I've even used some of them before and had to stop. People will say, hey, we use this Pixar short that's on YouTube to go and teach plot really quickly because it does all these things, or to teach the circle story, which is prevalent in myths or things of that nature. And those will be offered as, hey, do this. Well, the problem with that is that YouTube is supposed to be on top of their copyright, but they're not. And so somebody who has that Pixar flick and uploaded it to YouTube and it's on their channel, and Pixar hasn't sent them the cease and desist letter yet, they don't own copyright. So unless it's actually Pixar is the channel and they've said, hey, you can use this, don't link to it. So those, and then there's also read alouds like that, where one, like Jordan goes and uploads his reading of Dr. Seuss because he loves Dr. Seuss, and he's put it on his document camera and he's read it. And we see it online and we're like, oh, we can just do this read aloud. Well, actually, he's violating copyright. Now, you get some coverage using that a little bit by saying like, hey, YouTube was supposed to take this down. Jordan was not supposed to put this up. He's the one that should be getting sued, but you have helped distribute it. So you are liable as much as he is. So as you link out, or as you think about making resources or giving us resources or what you've used in the classroom, before we can put it in curriculum documents, we need to be 100% sure that, hey, we actually have copyright to those things. So if you're using read alouds, if you're using Pixar videos to show us things, or you're using some video on YouTube, we need to make sure that the person posting it has the copyright and you're linking to the copyright holder. So those are some things to think about. I'm going to give you just a second here, and I want you to take a minute. I'm going to drop these into the chat. So, provided I can find the chat. Stop screen sharing for a minute. And I want you to take a minute and go, you can just skim and scan, but there's one, these are kind of fun to look at, but that's not the one I wanted. Yeah, actually that is the one I wanted. All right, so one area that I always think about is memes and GIFs. How many people in their texting or in email or anything like that have ever used a meme, or even in staff development, dropped one into the chat? I never even thought about it, but there are rules. These articles are fun ways to go and explore some of the ins and outs of copyright. So what I'm going to ask you to do is pick one of the two, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, and I want you to go and just take 5 minutes, read over it, think about what you learned, and then when we come back after that 5 minutes, I'll put a timer up. When we come back after that 5 minutes, we're going to share I'll give you directions for how to share in the chat what you discovered. So take 5 minutes and go read those. And of course, as you read, you can mute your video or whatever you would like to do in that situation. Okay, so that should be the end of 5 minutes. I want you to think about why I wanted to pick those is I think both cases, whether we're looking at the memes or looking at the GIFs, they've both been kind of cleared because it falls under social commentary, or they're not using it for commercial purposes, or it's such short form that out of context, it really doesn't steal much of the work. But there might have been a few other things. When I read it, I learned things about copyright that I didn't know. And so what I want you to think about is, what did you learn from reading those articles about copyright that maybe you didn't know before? What was an aha moment? I also want to take a moment to say that if you are a GIF person and you're getting like really cringy every time I say GIF, the original creator of the file form pronounced it GIF. And so also this is a good time just to let you know, I have a few people that want to fist fight me too, because I like the, I don't like the, what comma is that? The Oxford comma. I think we should leave it out. And there's several people in my own department who want to fight me for that. Jennifer is chief among those. And then there's other people in some of the other departments that are like, you're an idiot, Chris. So we can have that fun fight later. I'm just kidding, of course, but take a minute, type out what did you learn from that article that you read about copyright into your comment. And then in a minute, laughing at you, Katie. And in a minute, I'll ask you to hit return and we'll do a waterfall of all the things you learned about copyright. So take just a minute, type what you learned, and then I'll ask you to hit return. And if you didn't learn anything from the article, what have you learned from the presentation so far? About 30 more seconds. And go ahead and start hitting return for me as you finish typing your statement.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when teachers post things like on Canvas, like you were saying, if it's just that for that one day, it's okay. But if they're like, they use it for the next year, you're saying that if they don't have permission to use that, then that would be considered a violation?
A lot of times, yes. Those Canvas courses need to be closed. Those links need to be pulled, especially if you didn't get permission to post an article and you are posting your own PDF of it. If you're linking out to the web page, you're likely covered. You probably, and I'll show you in just a second how to check their terms and conditions. So that's the short answer is they should take it down or close the course the day after they use it. You know, or after their students have wrapped it up. Of course, there's going to be time for makeup work and things like that. All right, so
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Did I answer your question completely? I'm sorry,
yes,
Leslie.
Yeah, but I was going to ask, like, sometimes they use images off the internet, and if they cite it, is that okay, or they still have to get permission?
They need to check the terms and conditions and typically get permission. And that gets, I don't think people are as hunting down some of those things as much as we can see from the GIFs and the memes on that case. But I do think that it's just as a best case scenario, you should cover yourself and at least cite it, but check and see if it's okay. And if you can get away with using something that is, like if you're creating a PowerPoint or something and you want to get their attention, make sure you use something that is in Creative Commons. And, you know, be careful too. Like if you're using a graphic organizer that's in a published book from some professional development you went to, and you don't have permission to share that, you could be getting yourself into trouble. All right, let me look at these comments. So the copyright issue regarding memes is based on the ability to go directly or indirectly generate revenue from the memes. So that's a lot of it. If you aren't making money off the meme, then it's okay. I learned that although you probably won't get into legal trouble using memes or GIFs, someone could press it legally in certain contexts, should they feel the desire and should they have too much time on their hands. Exactly. They don't want us making money off their work. That's really a huge thing with copyright. So if we're taking away their right to make money, their ability to make money, or we're making money off of their work and it's, you know, we've repurposed their work, then that's a huge problem. And that's actually too, like Fan fiction, if you ever follow that, people are writing other people's characters. How are they getting away with it? They don't make any profit off of it. And it's not as good typically as the original work. And so the fan community is being supported, and the people don't always want to take that away from the fans. And they know that that could be like, it could hurt them financially if that's taken away. But truthfully, fan fiction is technically a violation of copyrights. So those are all things to think about. As educators, we can be targeted a little bit more because what we might inadvertently do is take away somebody's ability to make money. And so that's kind of what it comes down to. So to show you a few more things, let me get back into my presentation. As we look at that, some things for Canvas consideration. Link to the material rather than making an electronic copy available to students. Make sure that texts are related to the course being taught. Place the text in the context of the course, explain why they were chosen and what they're intended to illustrate. Limit access to the text to students enrolled in the course and remove when the course is over. Notify students that texts are being made available for teaching, study, and research only, and provide an acknowledgement of the source, copyright, and publisher. Check what rights are given to purchase textbooks and materials. So just to give you an idea, I think it's poetry. No, it's not poetry. Poetry Foundation, that's the one I use the most. So when you go to Poetry Foundation, just to give an example, a lot of times in high school, we need access to multiple poems, sometimes in junior high as well. And in elementary, you guys may need to get access to another poem. When we get to all of these things, and I have teachers who are using these poems, hey, it's hosted on this website. What do I need to know to be able to share from this website? Well, if you come all the way down to the bottom where it usually is, contact us, privacy policies, terms of use. If you click on this and you read through all the legalese, terms of service, you get down and you find out embeddable players and widgets. To the extent that the Poetry Foundation makes available to you the services or otherwise in an embeddable player for viewing of audio and all that and widgets, you will not alter. So if you're using their app, they're asking you not to modify it. Copyright infringement, if you believe that your work has been copied in a way to constitute. So basically, if they want to say, hey, if we've actually infringed your copyright, let us know about it. Unlawful or prohibited use. You agree not to circumvent, disable, or otherwise interfere with security related. You agree that you will not use any bot crawler. So they've got all of this. Links to third-party websites. From time to time, this talks about when they have ads. Links to their services. This is where we want to be. So you have to read through tons and tons of stuff on every website. Newspaper websites will have this. And as you go out and you say, for instance, you have something that you've used and you're making an intervention for English 2, and you're like, I want to use this persuasive article that I've always used from such and such, from the Miami Herald. You got to go to where the article is linked on the Miami Herald website. You got to go to their terms and conditions, and you got to come down and read what it says. And so it says, by creating a link, you agree to be bound to the following terms. And then it tells you all the terms. And it says you can't put any intermediate page, splash page, or other content between the link and the applicable page. So I told my teachers, don't embed it into Canvas, make it link out so it pops open another window. That became a problem, of course, because as soon as kids like have multiple windows open, they start not engaging. But that was my solution for that. So those are things that you have to think about as you're looking at and creating resources for us and for your work. You can go and look at the terms and conditions. So some things that have come up over the past year. I had a campus team that paid for the rights. They had the book. And so we're just going to give our kids the PDFs because we can't hand them the physical book. So we have these illegal PDFs, chapters of the book. We're just going to give it to them because we bought all the books. They actually have copyright. The truth is that the way the copyright law is written is that when you switch formats, if you go from print to digital or you go from print to audio, you have to have the rights to that as well. And what this team did actually was pretty awesome on their part. They emailed the publisher. They said, hey, we have, 300 copies of this book, and we have only 150 students in this grade level that are going to be getting these PDFs. Can we give them PDFs because we can't hand out physical copies of the book? And the publisher said, yes, you may, but they made all the same terms and conditions. You have to take them down and close the class after the class is over and make sure that they're not available on the web to other people outside of that class. And so it worked with them. I had people ask me at first, can I put HMH materials in Canvas? Now we do actually have modules from HMH that go directly into Canvas. Does copyright come into play? Actually, the way we worked with HMH, you can use anything from our adoption in Canvas unless otherwise noted by the publisher. And in those cases, you'll check with us and we'll either find out or know whether you can use those or not. I had a testing facilitator ask me, hey, can I put these passages in Canvas from the unit summative assessment? Because you have used a passage that's from STAR, and they saw the copyright at the bottom, but it was the STAR, it was what STAR had embedded, and it wasn't us saying, hey, this is the STAR test. And once I got to it and saw that, oh yeah, no, that's the STAR test, those are on the web, those are free to use. But the problem that really came up is that the citation wasn't correct. So it was a case of, hey, make sure you have the citation. And then I like to call him problem child. Jordan was asking me, hey, I want to be able to use ads in my PowerPoint resources, but I can't find copyright on them. Almost always, Jordan went ahead and I believe he made his own fake ads or just did not use those resources because he could not find copyright on how to use the ads. And those are cases where you have to write the advertising agency or the company that is using the ad. I can't imagine they would say no, since it will get them more visibility. But I guess if you were being critical of their methodology or something like that, they might say no. So those are some things that have come up. So what does this mean for our work? And I've already talked about some of this, but if we have a case where a teacher violates copyright, like say for instance, you're in a PLC and they come in and say, hey, we're going to go ahead, we have rights to the book, we're going to go ahead and give out PDFs, and nobody checks, and you guys all do it, and your leader said do this, and nobody questions it, and you all did it, then the very worst case scenario is that the 4 of you or the 3 of you or however many on the team might have been in trouble. So that one teacher who led you down the wrong path. All right, so they got 3 people in trouble. Whether that's fired from the district, sued, or anything like that. If we do that at the district level and we put something in a document for the whole district to use, we get a lot more people in trouble and we're dealing with a lot more of a problem. So what does that mean for our work? It means that when we're putting resources in the curriculum documents, which are some of the things we're going to be asking you to create, we need to know that they're copyright free or that we have copyright permission on them. We also have assessments that we create and publish, whether that is the CA, the USA, which many campuses might be using as a campus-based assessments, or text that we suggest as possibility for instructional use. So we need to make sure that all those sources we have permission to use. So while as a teacher, sometimes you can be like, I'm pretty sure I'm covered under fair use. You know, I made copies in my classroom and we're going to throw them away right after when we're face to face, or I linked out and I think that covers it. When we're writing for curriculum, we need to be double sure that we're absolutely 100% clear to use this. So how do we do that? Or give me some examples, Chris, of what you're talking about. So the New York Times actually has resources for educators that they've just very much cleared, like you can use these. You don't have to worry about copyright. There's a whole section on the website that you can use. There's a famous writer, teacher, Kelly Gallagher, who has written a lot for secondary on reading and writing. And he has a website, and on his website, he has what's called Article of the Week. And I've linked out to that as a resource before. But as soon as everything blew up and we're doing everything on the web, I went to Kelly Gallagher's website. Instead of Article of the Week saying, hey, just take these articles and use them the way I'm showing you how to use them, he has a little disclaimer that says, hey, I need you to go ahead and go get copyright on that and make sure that you've checked with these people before you use these articles. So he didn't check and say it was okay. He said it's up to you if you're going to use them in your classroom to go check and see if they're okay. I've written questions for them. Here are the link outs. As a resource writer, I am much more comfortable and think it's much more useful to give teachers the link to the New York Times resource that has been cleared and vetted and said, hey, it's all right. You can use this, rather than to say, hey, here's a resource you can use, but you need to go do extra legwork to make sure that you're okay. Because now I'm responsible for putting something up that, like, while there is a disclaimer that says, hey, you need to do your legwork and make sure that you're within your rights to use this. If the teacher doesn't do that and I've published it, it's like this. I have basically set up some teachers for trouble and set myself up for trouble and set the district up for trouble. So I look for, hey, what is absolutely no problem, use this. Let's make it so that make it easiest for the teacher so they don't have to go look it up. I've had the case in the past where when I came into the job, there were passages on the assessment that I didn't know where they came from. And it was like a news article. And then I found it on CNN's website. And I didn't know if we'd gotten permission for it. I think we probably had, but I had 12 questions and some passage that I didn't know where it came from. And now I'm going to publish it on the web because that's what Polaris is doing. And I had to rewrite, find new passages, make sure I had passages that I had copyright on, and rewrite my questions. And those are things that have happened. And with the STAR passages that are on the web and definitely for educational use, and they've already been used for testing, I can use those. But the problem is that I had on some of my CAs, I used those last year, and I had teachers contact me and say, hey, the student, because I had to cite it, the link to where it was actually right there in the passage, and students are taking it online and they can go find the key on the TEA website. And now is it even a valid passage? So I had to find those kinds of things. Also, going back to that creative versus factual, a lot of times we can avoid, like, we're not looking for creative articles or creative stories. We don't have to find a short story or poem. We have those in our textbook. We have the classics to use. But when I have to go create a test and I have to find a poem they've never seen before, I can run into problems because I don't have copyright on things that are not in the book or things that are not around. So I have to go and find something that's in public domain and create questions on that. And I get complaints because sometimes the things in public domain are very old and they're written in a language the students don't always understand. But as you might be asked to create a USA for a unit, or as you might be asked to go find some resources to link to, you need to keep these things in mind. Linking to a YouTube of a read aloud, we need to make sure that it's one of the ones that's approved, that the publishers actually said, hey, this is the read aloud of this book and you're allowed to use it. When you consider, like, I have written, as a teacher, I wrote resources with my PLC where we each wrote pieces of it, right? And so, and I've had even on my cadre, people say, hey, me and another teacher wrote this and it works perfectly for what you're asking for this intervention. Can I give it to you? And I'm like, yeah, as long as you know that the other, like, talk to the other teacher, and I need an email saying that they give permission. And I need to know that everything you used inside of it is not that y'all created and it's not copyrighted anywhere. And I need you to understand that once you share it with me, district owns the copyright on it. So if you write the resource completely by yourself, you're completely fine to turn that in. If you create a graphic organizer, or you have, you know, a PowerPoint that you made that really explains allusions and poetry, as long as you wrote it by yourself, you can turn those in as your work, and we can take that. You can tell me where you got your work or where you got your ideas, and we can adapt it and use it. But if you wrote it with your team, then you need to get the permission of the other people who worked on it. And then we've also had issues where I've had people share with me things that have other, like, their PDFs of a workbook or something I got off Teachers Pay Teachers, or they saw it on Pinterest and then they said, hey, can we just use this? And as a teacher, there were many times when we might just do that, right? Like, we'll just use this thing we saw on Pinterest because it's just a anchor chart that somebody took a picture of and uploaded. And maybe they didn't even create it. They got the idea from somebody else. But the problem with that is that if I put an image up from Pinterest that you didn't create and I didn't create, or if I get something from Teachers Pay Teachers, or if you've created something for Teachers Pay Teachers, that copyright is with Teachers Pay Teachers and you. We can't just, once we get it for the district, you did have to come down from Teachers Pay Teachers, which presents all kinds of problems. So make sure as you work with us that you're working on creating your own work, linking to work of, or getting permission and linking to work of others that is okay. And using all of that, copyright free as much as possible. And when you have doubts, you can ask your friendly neighborhood CNI specialist. This is the case, of course, found a picture of Jordan from a time he froze up in the Zoom meeting and dropped it in here. And I tried to give Jordan every opportunity to pull that out, but I don't think he ever looked at my presentation beforehand. So I just decided to throw him under the bus.
A good looking guy.
Hey, Chris.
Right there.
Yes.
I have a question because this has come up before. What if I'm looking at a graphic organizer that someone else created and I make one sort of like it? Am I okay?
Yeah, and I think graphic organizers are kind of tough. So if it's a graphic organizer from like a published work, right? And you know that, like, hey, Kelly Gallagher made this graphic organizer and it's really great. What I've done, especially when it's a book that I know that professionally we've distributed to teachers and we have a lot of, is I'll just say, use the Kelly Gallagher SDQR chart. And then I'll reference the book it's in. And I might even link to a description of what it is, but not actually the chart itself. If I change the chart, if I add things to the chart and take away from the chart and it's a significant amount that's changed it, because I've changed the work and it's been adapted, I'm probably okay using it. But if I just and then we also check with your specialist, because we have those Jennifer Saravallo books that we have a lot of graphic organizers from, but we actually have copyright permission to use those. So if I have a specialist who says, or I have a cadre member who says to me, you know what, I always use this from the Jennifer Saravallo book, I'm going to add that in as a resource and describe what I do with it, how I've modified it. We have copyright on it, so we can use it, and that's okay. But if it's something we found on Pinterest or Teachers Pay Teachers and we just want to change one thing to it, or we just want to take all the cutesy pictures off of it and make it a straight Word document with boxes, we need to be very careful with that and probably not do it. When in doubt, don't, is my solution on all of those things. And then my idea is like, okay, so what I step back as a creator, when I've had to create those things, I step back and ask myself, what does this graphic organizer do that I really like? And if I were to design it from scratch without having seen it, how might I design it? How might I reword it? How might I change it? And then I create one of my own. And if then I have somebody else look at it and go, hey, do these look too much the same? So a lot of times my person on that is my two people, most of the time, are Jordan and Jennifer, because we work closely together all the time. But I also might ask a trusted other colleague.
I want to piggyback on that question. There are things, especially in like reading, for example, that are so common in terms of like graphic organizers. Like I'm thinking of the plot mountain. So like, because like, yeah, I could create a plot mountain that looks the same as a bajillion other people's, but like that's something that's so traditionally used to teach plot. What would you do in a case like that?
I don't think anybody owns copyright on that, because the plot chart is the plot chart and it's always been the plot chart. I don't even know who created it first. And I even like, there are certain things that I don't get super. If I see, for instance, if I'm reading a professional book and you read these teachers who've written professional books, I keep going back to Kelly Gallagher because he's my personal favorite. But Kelly Gallagher will cite other people's work, and then he will have a graphic organizer from those other people's work. Now, I'm sure he got permission, but there are certain things like writing territories. We don't necessarily, like, I even forget who has created that. Or free writing. There's a guy who actually pioneered free writing as a writing technique. But because everybody knows what free writing is and because it's used, and I'm not presenting it in an exact way that this guy wrote free writing, I'm writing a bulleted list of how to do free writing as my resource for teachers who've never taught free writing before to look at as a brainstorming activity. I'm okay. So there are some things that, yeah, exactly. It's come up so much and it's so far out there and there's so much of it or it's been around so long that nobody even knows what copyright is on it. I think we're safe in that. And that's another case where it's like, talk it over with your specialist. As you're turning something in and you have a question, or you're like, hey, I use this thing that everybody uses, just make notes in your email when you turn that work in. Like, hey, plot mountain's in this one. Pretty sure there's no copyright on that, but just want to let you know I didn't create the plot mountain. And I would probably put an LOL in parentheses next to that, because that's pretty common knowledge, right? Other questions? This is a good time for that. Does anybody have other questions about that?
You also mentioned the example of the teachers during the pandemic who did PDFs of books because they couldn't share them. What's the status on class sets of books in general? Like, what's the legality of that, like in terms of you know, clearly like we'll have like lit circles, for example. So like what do we have to do with that?
With that, because so as I get to this closing text part, as much as possible, when you're making a text, if you have to recommend a text or opt for something from the adoption or in resources that are made available from the district, right? So if we have lit circles, I don't know exactly what that looks like at the elementary level, but if we have lit circles, I know that they provided you with books, right, in your classroom that you can use for lit circles. I know HMH had some of that in the adoption. Your librarians probably got some curated carts that she puts around for that. That's okay, because they have a physical copy of the book that the district paid for, or the teacher paid for, or somebody paid for, right? Or we're asking them to go buy a copy of the book in some cases, although we've moved away from that quite a bit. But as far as lit circles or going and getting something from the textbook, that's where we want to point. That's what we want to be able to say, like, hey, we know that, like, for instance, when I give the example of use the Kelly Gallagher SDQR chart, I know that that Kelly Gallagher book should be on every high school campus somewhere for the teachers to have access to. If not, they should email me and ask me, and I should be able to chase down where is it on your campus so you can go find it. Same thing with the Jennifer Saravallo books at junior high and elementary levels, right? But yes, and it's one of those things. If you know that it's in the district and we would prefer it be something that's available to every campus. And when we write it into our curriculum, we might say other books that your campus has purchased, or other books available through your library or that you have purchased for students via the classroom that are, you know, appropriate for the audience and all of that kind of thing too, right?
Okay, perfect. So basically, if I'm understanding, like, obviously for curriculum purposes, we would want to point to resources that everyone has access to, but even if like a teacher on campus like purchased a class set or something, like that would be okay.
Right. Or they got like some fundraiser where they got a class set purchased for them or something. Right. That would be okay, but we always want to give them the caveat that, hey, make sure, like, if you're giving something to students that you purchased, you have to consider the audience, and if it's best to be done through lit circles and not through like a whole class read, right? Because if it's a controversial topic or something that's not approved, teacher can get in real trouble. And that comes up here on my bulleted list. So let me talk a little bit about this for a second, and then we'll get.
Chris, can I close that out with something that I think the big thing here is to tie the different things Chris has said together. The key to that last question Katie posed was, you know, purchased. If we as a district have purchased that text, as long as you're not taking pictures and posting it on Canvas or something, of course you can use that book in your classes without worrying about copyright, because we bought it for that use. And so, you know, Chris was talking earlier about, you know, are we infringing on the market of that author? Well, no, if we purchased it for you as a district, you are free and clear to use it in those lit circles in your classroom. Now, we purchased hard copies. So does that mean we can post them all over Canvas? No. But yeah, Katie, I think Katie and Chris were both hitting on that. I mean, if you've purchased it, that's what it's for.
Exactly. And so as you design resources, interventions, extensions, if you get asked to write a test, if you work on any of these kinds of things, if you're doing like, you know, even like the attention getter or a formative assessment or any of those kinds of things, when you're looking at those resources, first of all, we like it. And when I write, I try to keep it as generic as possible and don't tie them to specific texts, because maybe this campus over on this side of the town is really into this topic, but this campus is into another topic. I want the teacher to have the freedom to choose from something in the textbook or things they have access to that are appropriate for their students. So the first step when I'm writing is I want to keep that as generic as possible and not go specificity on texts. I want them to be able to say, all right, I'm going to use this text. And I'm going to, my teachers have seen, and I'm sorry for those of you that have probably sat through it twice now, have seen large portions of this copyright presentation already, so they know. And then when I go and talk to them on campuses individually, we talk on each specific unit, hey, if you're going to use this text, you need to link out. Or if you want to use something from this website, the terms and conditions say it's okay, but you need to do these things, right? Or preferably go with this from the textbook, or go with this from your classroom library. If you do have to recommend a text, first opt for something that we know we've provided them with, something from the adoptions or resources that are made available from the district. So first, keep it generic. Try not to link it to a text. Okay, but I need them to specifically understand how different viewpoints affect the plot. And I know that these 2 short stories from the text really illustrate that well for this grade level. Okay, cite those from the textbook. All right, that's great. And then there's times too, I've had this come up. If we're going to go ask students to watch something on the web or watch something on their own, sometimes we ask students to have student choice and pick their own texts. And that relieves a lot. As long as we let students have choice, there's a lot that they can do. And I've had some really great, some of my best resources have been extensions and interventions where my teachers have asked, hey, now that you know this argumentative technique that's been applied here in this article we've read, I want you to go watch all the advertisements you can find tonight and give me examples of all the different argumentative techniques they use in the advertisement. Well, then the kid's picking it up and the kid's going and looking for it in text that they see in the real world. That's awesome. But what I don't like particularly is when we give them examples of like, go watch some TV shows. And then one of the TV shows that was listed off was like, How to Get Away with Murder. Which, while I do probably have some high school students watching that, and it was a high school resource, it was not an elementary school resource, but I don't necessarily want to drive my students to something that a parent's going to be like, really? That's the show you want my kid to watch? Like, that's the example you gave? I've just had a big conversation about don't watch that. I think too, we also drive, at the secondary level, a lot of times we might recommend a TED Talk or something for them to watch that's, interesting. As we look at those TED Talks or things like that, again, avoid specificity. I had one teacher who was like, there's a great TED Talk about the Wu-Tang Clan and Shakespeare. And I want to give you this resource where I give the lesson and this is how they go through and they listen to this guy and look at Wu-Tang's lyrics. And I'm like, as much as I love Wu-Tang personally, I'm not sure I want to be responsible for putting that in front of students when it's got parental advisory stickers all over the album, which dates me because I had the CD, I didn't get it on MP3, right? But those kinds of resources, or, if the TED Talk starts with caution, there's about to be some graphic scenes in this TED Talk, probably not appropriate for class, right? So I'm not saying you can never give me a resource that says, look at this TED Talk, but please make sure that as you build resources and you recommend things, consider the parents in our district that might bring things up, the things that might get me before a school board or a teacher before a school board. We don't want those in there, right? And it may be like in your classroom, hey, we taught, like several of my students have brought up this show and they really want to talk about it. In your classroom, you might say, yes, you can use How to Get Away with Murder as your text as an example, and we'll discuss it. But you don't want to tell other teachers to go out and do that because they don't have the relationship with their students that you have. And that's very specific. And again, a lot of this can be solved by going back to the most generic. Write your resources to be as generic as possible because that gives teachers the flexibility to do what they want in their classroom. All right. So those are some things that I really wanted you to think about with copyright, and a little bit even with when we recommend and build resources, considering what kind of text and where we're sourcing those texts from. I know that was a lot of information. I know that, like, I feel like the bad guy when I have to have the copyright talk with my teachers, especially sometimes when teachers were, there was a time when I was putting stuff like, oh, I found this blog on the web and it's really great. We're just going to go ahead and annotate where they did all these things. And it's like, oh, good job, Chris, you violated copyright. Yes, probably fair use the first time I did it, but when I went back to it the next year, not so much, right? And now that I know better, I try to do better, and that's what I want to be able to help y'all do as well. And I'm sure that a lot of you, the fact that you're here tells me already, like, you're ahead of so many of our colleagues, not because you're that much of a better teacher, but because you do your research, you do your reading, you cover your bases, and you've probably already thought about copyright a lot. And if you haven't, it's time to start. And like, now you know better, you will probably do better as well. Are there any other questions that you guys have? I mean, that was a lot of information. Any questions that immediately came up? You're like already like, oh gosh, I got to go open my Canvas and pull all this stuff down. Anything you need to ask me or talk about before I conclude? All right, just remember, as that comes up throughout the school year, or as you're writing resources, you're going to come across something like, oh, I always use this story to teach that, and it was in the previous adoption, right? And you might be like, oh, so how do I do that now? Reach out to us. That story might be in the public domain. Frequently, there are things that are in the public domain that are in textbooks because the textbooks don't have to pay for them. All right, so just check with us and talk to us about it, and we will always be a resource that helps and guides you in that process. All right. Well, I guess
all right. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate that. Please just continue to think about copyright as you support us with our documents. The specialists will give out deliverables assignments, and so some of you will be right in the trenches with finding resources, you know, embedding some of the resources for us to utilize in the curriculum documents. And so you'll be side by side with the copyright information. And so it's important for us to all learn about copyright information as we, number one, go out and work with students and instructing students with resources. And then number two, as you support us with our curriculum work. Let's take a 5-minute break, just a real 2-function 5-minute break. And then we'll come back and hear from Jordan, and then after which we will dismiss you for today. So 5 minutes, let's come back at 11:46 and we'll start right away with Jordan. Thank you so much.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
How are you doing this summer?
Oh, so far so good.
That's good. Hi, Jordan.
Howdy.
Have y'all done anything interesting this summer?
No, Chris has. I have not.
I went on a 3-week road trip with my family and we hit 5 national parks.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah. So we went west. So we did White Sands in New Mexico.
Nice.
Then the Grand Canyon. Then Joshua Tree in California. Then Redwoods in California. And then Sequoia in California.
Wow. I bet
Yeah.
you got some good pictures.
We did. It was pretty awesome.
That's so cool. That's really neat. Hi, guys. Andrea, I ran into somebody. I had brunch with a woman named Kimberly from Crow, and she says she knows you, and she says hi. To look up her last name. It starts with an E, but I can never pronounce it well.
Oh, yes. Yes, Kimberly. Tell her I said hello.
She's lovely.
Yes, she's a great teacher.
Yeah, I've actually known her since I was 16. That's why I can never remember her maiden name.
Yes, she's awesome. Well, welcome back. One of the things, and thank you, Chris, for your copyright presentation and the information shared. I know this year, particularly high school, we have had a few conversations with HR surrounding text, number one, and texts that are not on our adopted novel list that is housed on Curriculum Central. So if you are high school, we need you to go out and share with others that there is a list of vetted novels that's currently on Curriculum and Central, and it stays on there all year. Not to say that those are the only novels that should be utilized, but we do have a resource already available with those novels. If using additional novels is so important, again, and Chris touched on this, that is appropriate for the audience and that you actually read the novel before putting it in front of students. You have to know what's in there. We have parents that are reading novels with their students, and some of it it's it's about age appropriateness, and also consider the standards. Everything has to be tied to the standard. What are you trying to teach from that novel? In addition to that, we had a situation this year also around the TED Talk. And so we cannot support you as curriculum and instruction team when as soon as the TED Talk comes on, it says caution, nice and red at the beginning of the movie. So just reminders to really first view anything that you put in front of students and read anything that you ask students to do in advance. So with that being said, thank you again, Chris. Thank you for your attention to the copyright information during his presentation. So Jordan will share just information around the style guide. And really it is up to Jordan as to when we will finish our time together. And so Jordan, take it away. And I know it's really hard to really talk about the documents and have you to do some work around the documents virtually. And so we'll go into more depth when we are face to face so that you'll have an opportunity to see, touch, and actually engage in writing some of the pieces in the document. So just know that that's coming up in August. You'll have an opportunity to practice before being asked to deliver anything or create anything. So we do understand we're virtual right now. So just engage in Jordan's presentation, and then practice will be coming soon.
All right, well, I've got about 3 hours and 28 minutes worth of stuff for you, so this should be nice and easy. But we are lightening things up from Chris's presentation on copyright. Now we're going to talk about following rules in documents, so a nice, easy transition. But seriously, Chris will be the first one to point out to you that I'm illiterate, and he's mostly right. But one of the things that I typically do is I kind of get a bit anal retentive when it comes to formatting and how our documents look. And that's kind of, that's why I'm the ELAR representative on that committee that Danielle was talking about earlier. So we're going to go a little more in depth into that curriculum and instruction guide booklet that Danielle was referencing. There are a few pieces that are ELAR specific that we just wanted to point out to you. But as Andrea said, the best way to really wrap your brain around this stuff is to see it in documents. And I didn't want to try and fumble with it over this presentation, especially when we have people from all grade levels, because there's some stuff that Sandra and Taisha and Nikki are going to want to point out that's just fundamentally different in some of those elementary documents from what we're doing in secondary. And unfortunately, I don't think we have any 6th grade teachers here today, but if you're working on 6th grade documents, they look more like secondary because I'm writing them and it's kind of a bridge grade as far as the state is concerned. So bear with me as we go through this. We're gonna, like I said, highlight some points, show you a couple things, just so you can have it filed away as we get into the work this year. And it helps if I share my screen and, you know, click through the slides. All right, fun. Okay. So the CNI guide is meant to do 3 things. First, structure uniformity. As I know we have a couple teachers on here that said they're self-contained. We have teachers such as those. We have administrators who are working across multiple contents and grade levels. This uniformity is meant to make their lives easier. So if they're having to kick back and forth between math and ELAR, while there may be some content differences, the look and feel will be the same. The placement of material will be the same. And so we really want to make that as easy as possible for our teachers working in multiple contents and administrators. It's meant to organize information. As you work to help us with building documents and editing those, we want to make sure that they're conveying information in a clear and logical way. And this guide helps to kind of flesh out what that order will be. Lastly, providing checkpoints. Danielle alluded to this, that it's really useful as you're going through these to have that guide out as almost a checklist. And so we want to keep that in mind as we work through this, that's really what this is about. It's not a gotcha, not a thing to make your life more difficult, but it's meant to be a checklist to make sure that everything we put out as a curriculum and instruction department, which you are now a part of, is meant to be the best it can be for our teachers. And so that's kind of orienting our brains a little bit around this guide. All right, so like I said, we want to look at some ELAR specific pieces, and the first is subcategories. And we are special. Every content area has slight differences when it comes to subcategories, and so I want to show you a little bit about those. The first is about learning areas. Our curriculum documents are broken down into some subsections. And so it's important to know what those are. You'll see them in the learning progressions, the companion documents, and some other pieces. So the first is word study. Word study is called out specifically in kindergarten through 5th grade. Starting in 6th grade, that vocabulary piece is more embedded into other parts of learning. So we don't call word study out separately in grade 6 through English 4, but K-5 has it. And then all grade levels will have reading and writing workshop. In a perfect world, if you spend any time in our TEKS, this new adoption of standards is really meant to be blended, where reading and writing are happening simultaneously. However, when trying to set up learning targets and breakout resources, it's easier for teachers to see them as separate components. In balanced literacy, which is a format we really embrace. It's set up with these different pieces in different areas. And so that's how our documents look, is with the reading workshop and a writing workshop portion. But again, in instruction, they do blend well together. So those are big subcategories. Those break down even further when we start looking at our companion document, because when sharing resources, there are different areas these resources break into. And so we want to make sure that those categories are also similar. In elementary, those further subcategories are balanced literacy, the same word study and workshops we had before. But this year, we are also putting back in a teacher reference section to the companion document. And the purpose of this, which will become even more clear here in a minute as we look at context statements, but the idea behind teacher reference section is that these are resources that are really only touched by the teacher, okay? So these are gonna be walkthrough scripts. These will be maybe one of the things I have in my documents are some different poetry analysis tools like SIFT or TPCast, things like that, where I have a page that is a walkthrough for the teacher, just reminding them about different steps of that process. It's not meant for the students. I have a separate page for graphic organizer for those kids to use. And so those things, books, pieces, professional learning books, things like that would go in teacher reference. And so that's a piece that we've added in for clarity. The secondary categories, we just have the 3: reading and writing workshop and teacher reference. Okay. And as we, like I said, when we get into more hands-on with the documents, you'll see these a little more. If you've spent time in companion documents over the last year, you should recognize most of these because we've been using them for a while now. Okay. All right. Questions about those subcategories? It's pretty self-explanatory, but that is kind of the first piece you'll notice as you get in that's different between ELAR and our other content area counterparts. I should probably also pull up the chat so I can actually see what you're saying. Okay, I'm not seeing questions, so we're gonna keep on going. All right. The next thing I want to look at is context statements. We will have Cadre work at varying degrees with our companion documents, and something that we've tried to shift to in these documents from our old IFDs we used a few years ago is that rather than just have bulleted lists of resources, we want to give actual statements outlining how that resource is meant to be used and how it's meant to achieve learning, so that teachers know before they even click on the link, oh, okay, this is what's happening in this resource. And there's been a lot of conversation and work on our department level about how those statements need to read, how to form them. We've done a lot of practicing, and so I want to give a little bit of that experience to you. The goal for these statements is clarity. Okay, we've got to be clear with our teachers. And so in the past, my document, I'm using examples from my documents right now, mostly because I don't want to pick on other specialists who don't know I'm using their work. You know, I had statements in mind that it was like, use such and such graphic organizer to analyze a text. Well, does that tell you as a teacher at all what you're supposed to do with that graphic organizer? No, it just says use it and analyze the text. We want to give a little more background on exactly what's happening and how that text is meant to fit in the bigger scheme of things. So some things to know before I show you examples of these statements. First, these are student-focused statements. So they are written from a student point of view to show what they will be doing with the resource, as well as kind of how their thinking is meant to develop. So this could look like a learning objective, really. If you are posting learning objectives for your students daily, you'll recognize the format. The only difference here is obviously those teacher reference materials will be written from teacher point of view more often than not, because again, those are for teachers, not kids. Cognitive verbs. Each statement begins with a cognitive verb. We're wanting to try and use, whether you use Bloom's or Costas or whatever leveling thinking chart you use, the goal is that we're employing those verbs to show the depth of thinking with these resources. Again, in mine and some other specialists, we've used things like understand a lot, and we want to go deeper than understand, right? So really getting specific. Also, we had a lot, I was really guilty of this, use whatever the resource title is to do something. Well, we know they're going to use it. That's the point. So we're flipping that around and putting the verb first to really drive the usage home. Lastly, each statement will end with the TEKS associated with that activity or resource. Okay, we want to make sure that everything is linked to our standards. Something we'll get into more as we dig deeper with you at our August days is the idea of priority instructional resources. That's how it is titled now on the companion document instead of suggested instructional resources. And the key is that we want to highlight the standards that our teachers are using. Chris and Jennifer and I did a training recently where we were having teachers develop plans, and the goal was pick your standard and then tell us what you're going to do to execute that standard. And we had several responses that were, well, I'm going to do this text with my kids. I'm like, okay, so what's the standard? Like, well, we didn't get to the standard. Everything starts with a standard. And so we really want to make sure that that's listed and associated with our resources to make it clear that we aren't just throwing these things out to fill time in class. We're throwing them out to achieve our goals and getting those kids mastery of skills. So here's a couple examples from my documents for the upcoming school year. They don't have to be incredibly complicated. That's the thing. And it looks like there's a lot on here, but that's because I made the font big. This is really like one line on the companion document. Determine the theme of a narrative by analyzing character traits and their impact on the story with the determining theme from character's graphic organizer. So I've given what the kids are doing, determining, okay, but they're also analyzing. So this is kind of a double whammy a bit, but it's very specific on what they're going to do with the organizer. They're going to analyze the character traits and how they impact the story, and then pull a theme, a lesson to be learned from that analysis. And so we want to give that kind of depth when we're working with these statements. Another one, develop inferences about characters in a drama based on stage directions and dialogue using a Jamboard. So this one's a little more vague, but it's still, our students are having to develop inferences. They're having to come up with these implicit ideas based on stage directions and dialogue in a drama. Okay, so that's the kind of thing we want to do. And now we're going to get some practice. So I'm going to show you an old statement from previous years. I'm going to show you kind of the standard with a summary of the standard and a little snippet of the resource mentioned. And I want you to think about how we could improve that statement using the criteria we've talked about. So student-centered, good cognitive verbs, and then you won't really have to worry about the TEK attached because it's on there. The TEKs are accurate. But how could we maybe make that a little more in depth? And I tried to give you examples that the resource is not complicated. So you're not going to have to be like, well, I have no idea how this is supposed to be used. It's going to be pretty self-explanatory. Okay. And so I'm going to have you think about it for a second, and then we'll drop our responses in the chat. So here's our first one. Ask thinking questions for writing to help develop drafts. The standard is 610A and B, and basically it's just the writing process steps for brainstorming and drafting. Okay. The snippet there is from a set of anchor charts I have where it's just sets of questions to help with each phase of the writing process. So we want to think, how could we beef up this statement to give teachers a little clearer picture of the thinking going on for students? And I feel like somebody did a waterfall earlier already. Chris, did you do that? So let's do the same thing. If you have an idea of how to improve this, or if you just want to type in a new statement, put that in your chat box. And here in a second, I'll tell you to go and we'll kind of waterfall that out. take about 30 more seconds. And remember, we're not looking for perfection. The specialists have been through multiple trainings on this, and we're still getting better. And this is the first time you're really having to see it or even try it. So we're just trying to show you a little bit of what we're going to work with this year. So just do your best. Right. Let's waterfall this thing. Hit enter on your responses. And go. There we go. Chris Drury, what a stand-up guy. Students will determine questions about their topic. Okay. Any other ideas? I did teach junior high and I'm still not good at wait time, like Danielle was saying. All right, here's what we're good. Oh, there's another one. Yes, Leslie. Well, dressed by creating questions, guide you through. Okay. All right, there we go. I need more time. Sorry, Erica. I could get more time. Okay. All right. Thank you to everyone sharing. Yes. Okay. So we're kind of hitting at it. We're being a little more specific. I actually have a couple of examples on this one to kind of show you a little bit, and you can see how they stack with what you've been working with. And then on draft 2, I don't. So you're on your own for example 2. So here are a couple. Develop drafts by using thinking questions for writing to generate ideas and expand on details. Okay, similar to some of the responses. The bottom bullet, excuse me, is actually the one in the documents for second 6 weeks. Plan and develop drafts by asking and answering reflective questions. So the goal again is we want those verbs, we want to show what our students are doing, and we want to make sure it's clear how they're doing it. So asking and answering reflective questions. The reflective was a big key in that bottom bullet. We really want to show that these aren't just, we're not asking random things. It's meant to be reflective. I actually like the top bullet a little better, and moving forward, I'm probably going to lean towards using that one. Just that idea of generating ideas and expanding on details. That's the purpose of those questions. Okay. Thank you for sharing. We're going to practice with one more. This one I stole from another training, so it is a 3rd grade example, but it's already been used in training, so hopefully the specialists don't get mad at me. So this one is guide students in establishing a purpose and outlining the steps to follow as they retell a story using HMH into reading, volume 1, module 2, lesson 2, retell, and there are the page numbers, including the use of the retell anchor chart. And I gave you a little snippet of the top half of the retell anchor chart. You can get a feel for what it is, even though it's not the full page. The standards 3.6a is establishing purposes for reading, and 3.7d is retelling and paraphrasing texts. Okay, so how could we write this in a way this is teacher-centered, right? Guide students. That's how a teacher would utilize these. We need to rework this so that it is student-focused. We have a clear cognitive or cognitive verb or what the students are actually doing, okay? And I will give you a hint on this one that I worked with when I was redoing it. It may be helpful to you to actually split this into 2 statements. There are 2 resources listed. So if you want to split it into two, you can, or you can try to rework it as one. And I'm going to give you more time on this one because I was apparently a little too quick last time. So take a couple minutes and think, how could I rework this to fit our guidelines? All right, as you're working through this, if you think you've hit on something, go ahead and type it in the chat, but don't hit send just yet. Okay, take another minute and then we will reveal. All right. Again, we're not looking for perfection. We're just trying to get our brains going. If you're stumped, don't worry about it. If you need more time, that's okay. But I also want to be respectful of our day. And so we're going to journey through this. Go ahead and submit what you're thinking. Okay, good. All right, I'm seeing a lot of similar responses where we're kind of thinking along those same lines, and that's kind of what we're wanting to do. And thank you for participating in this. I know it's kind of like drinking from a water hose a little bit, or a fire hose. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of thinking. But as we said, as we start to dig into this and put you to work with some of our documents and some of our other curricular pieces, this is a big piece that we are trying to be more aware of moving forward, is that anything we create or put in front of teachers can be really explained and communicated so that teachers are aware of what they're trying to do. And so keep that in mind as you help us, whether you're creating resources or reviewing documents. This is just a small piece we want to put on your radar. Don't stress about it though. It's not meant to be stressful. It's just meant to say, hey, this is something we're working with. All right, the last piece I want to talk about that's a little different with ELAR is assessment creation. Now, there's a lot of components with assessments that are the same throughout the content areas, but I just want to call some of the similarities out to you for our content area. So, test forms. Our ELAR test forms follow STAR formatting, and it's similar for our other content areas as well, but we really stick with those guidelines for all of our tests. I know in some of the other departments, other resources are being used. We pretty much stick to this format when it comes to summative assessments. Obviously, there's formatives that are much different, but those are a discussion for later. So the guide document also has a section on assessments. It has a place that talks about how to create assessments and how to develop questions, as well as the formatting of the actual different components. In English language arts, we have pieces that are all pretty exclusive to our subject area. The first is our tests have title pages that break up the booklets on our USAs and CAs. We have title pages for reading, composition, revising, and editing. We have passages, and I know some of the other tests may have some reading, but we are exclusively reading passages. And so there's formatting such as page numbers and paragraphing that needs to happen with those, as well as writing prompts. Those have to have a certain look, excuse me, and structure. And then those 26-line composition pages that come with them have to be formatted correctly so the students can be familiar with that output. Now, obviously, when we're talking about putting them into Polaris, it's a little bit different. The writing happens in a bit of a different setup there, but just in general, we're talking about the test forms themselves that we would normally print and give to students. So those formats. Like I said, we're utilizing STAR's multiple choice formatting. So here are a couple more specific pieces with that. Some of our other content areas are utilizing TEKS Resource Systems Assessment Creator when making their USAs. We do not. Our department made the choice that we're going to leave the assessment creator in TRS for the teachers to use as checkpoint assessments and things like that. And so all of our material it's typically either STAR released passages, department generated passages, or from other material adopted previously by the district. And so we are not currently digging into the assessment creator on our USAs. So it's just something to be aware of if you get tasked with working on those. CAs. Part of your role will be helping us review CAs. And that is a big lift because you're looking at both formatting and content for us. We're going to ask you to utilize our ELAR checklists. The checklists were made using the guides as a starting point. We have a kind of printable form that you can kind of check off and make written notes. And then Chris Drury spent a lot of time building a Google form for us that walks you through step by step. It's fantastic if you prefer to work digitally. And so we're going to ask, as you review those CAs for us, please make sure you're using the checklist. It's going to walk you through everything from, are the pages numbered correctly? Do the answer choices follow the A, B, C, D, F, G, H, J format? Is the font the right size? It's great. And so we ask that you lean towards those because they focus on the ELAR test components that obviously you won't need to look at the same things in a math test. You won't need to make sure quotes are italicized like you would on ours. So please consult those, but we will provide that to you when the time comes. Lastly, we try to maintain a certain format and guidelines mimicking the look and feel of STAR because that's what our kids are currently assessed on. And as STAR changes and evolves over the next couple of years with what the state has already told us is coming, we will obviously adapt and evolve our material as well. But the big piece is on these assessments, we've been tasked with making sure it feels like the state assessment. And so it's very important to us to maintain that level of creation. So we want to make sure that they're just consistent. And that goes everything from using Verdana font at the grade level designated size, the answer choices, numbering paragraphs, all of those things have to follow a certain piece. And so we will obviously walk you through that and make sure you're aware of all those pieces that, as I know as a teacher, I didn't really even think twice about the formatting until I was here and had to actually make it. And then it's a lot. So we want to just kind of show you some of those pieces. And like I said, on the USAs and some of the CAs, maybe even, you may get to help us rework some of those questions as needed. That's one of my favorite parts of editing the CAs is getting feedback from you guys on, hey, this question didn't quite feel right, or this answer choice is misleading and too close to the correct answer. Let's workshop it. And so you'll get to be a part of that process as well. All right, I went through a lot, but like I said, there's more as you saw in the book this morning, but really you need to have a document in your hand to really understand a lot of those pieces, and you don't today. So I didn't want to belabor it too much, just show you some of the highlights of how our department is going to use that guide a little differently from some of the others. So I do want to ask, I don't know that there will be because again, it's a bit heavy, but are there any questions about anything we covered or the guides or how that may tie into your responsibilities and deliverables? So, while some may find it riveting, most find it a bit dry. All right, well, I'm not going to belabor you with wait time on this. I will just say, as we get into the year, if you have questions about that guide or about something you see in it, or maybe since it is a living document, sometimes discrepancies pop up from section to section, please talk to your specialists, or you can contact me directly as a member of that committee that's working through it. Our goal, again, is to make that a clear and logical document as well. So your feedback is greatly appreciated, and hopefully it doesn't become a thorn in your side and it's a useful tool for you. So Andrea, I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you, Jordan, so much for that overview. We will have the opportunity to engage in this work with actual documents. So we have 2 days that are coming up on August the 2nd and August the 4th. And of course, we will engage in rewriting some statements and having you to write some statements from the student point of view as you work through some today. So we'll continue to practice that. This is not just a one-time opportunity to do that. You'll have time again to do that. In addition, I wanted to let you know that if you are a part, just make sure that you continue to keep up with the emails that are in the Cadre group. Rhonda, our secretary, created the Cadre group, and so you will receive emails through that group, any updates, any PDC locations of where we're going to host the meeting, that will be in those emails in the Cadre group. So just make sure that you're part of that Cadre group. Number one, that we did not leave your name off of the group, and that you continue to check those emails. Again, we will meet face-to-face on August the 2nd and August the 4th. Information will be sent to you via the Cadre group. Just be familiar with Rhonda Caesar's name. She is the secretary, so you'll receive a lot of emails from her as well as myself. Are there any questions about anything that we've talked about today? Deliverables, roles and responsibilities, style guide, copyrights. I think we've loaded you up with a lot of information today. And I know that you're probably saying, wow, they do all of that. We really hadn't even finished touching on everything that we do. So on August the 2nd, we'll go into, Jennifer has a piece on professional learning and how to put that together, and talk about adult learning theory a little bit in that presentation. We have Nikki, who will be presenting around technology and the use of Canvas and how to engage teachers and students with developing Canvas courses for students. Sandra will dig a little bit deeper into the actual documents. Taisha has a piece, and she's going to share more around TEK's resource system. So if you are an early learning teacher, you'll have the opportunity to really engage in TEK's resource system. I will do a piece also within those 2 days around our new STAR update, just to give you an overview about what is coming over the next couple of years when we talk about the redesign of STAR. And so you'll have the opportunity to see that as well. All right. Any questions for the good of the group? Thank you all so much. Yes, Jordan.
Oh, I just wanted to volunteer because, like I said, today's been dry. It gets a lot more fun once we start the work. So if you're sitting here like, gosh, this has been awful, like, I promise it's going to get a lot more fun when we actually start the work in August. Just hang with us. Don't bail yet. It's going to get fun.
It does. It gets fun. It makes a difference being, virtual and having those documents tangible to look at and manipulate. So it does get more exciting, and just working with the team in general is exciting virtually. So just imagine us face to face. We have a lot of fun together. So I'm not going to hold us any longer. I don't see any questions in the chat. Thank you again for being with us today. I hope it wasn't too boring for you, but you received a lot of information that you can just let it soak in your brain until we see you face to face. And we'll continue our discussions and continue to work. All right, if nothing else, you all have a great Monday. Enjoy lunch and the rest of your day.